The nature of life is evidenced in nature. Nature grows, and all of nature honors the desire to be more, to have more, and to do more. Life thrives when it's allowed to grow. And ideally, thriving is what we also, all of us, want to be able to do. Unfortunately, at some stage in life, most people find themselves settling into what I can only call a rut. And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with the ends kicked out. You want to quickly get out of any rut that you find yourself in. When you stop growing, that's when the coffin starts to appear. The simple truth is this, and this is true for everything in nature. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Every one of us dies. So the question we need to come to grips with is not, are we going to die? The question nature asks us to answer is, are we truly living? That's what motivation is about. It's the desire to move. It's the desire to grow and to excel. Have I lived? How have I lived? I'd love for you to take advantage of my Leadership Mindset Masterclass. It's all about providing you with the tools to ensure thriving for yourself and for those around you. Register today to receive the free introduction video and find out more about this acclaimed program. You'll also receive a copy of my international #1 bestseller, Compassionate Capitalism, A Journey to the Soul of Business. I'm Blaine Bartlett, and I look forward to helping you thrive. Go to leader.blainebartlett.com/toolkit discovery. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, obviously, Blaine Bartlett. Folks, this world that we live in is seemingly speeding up a whole bunch. And I mean seemingly, not because just from a perception standpoint, I think things are changing rapidly. But I'm very interested here, not so much in the change and the pace of change, but what's the disruption to relationships that change causes? And none of this, I think, shows up more in relief than the world of technology. The technology sector is incredibly fast moving because it is, getting in front of a whole lot of things is, I think, absolutely crucial. Not the least of which is the relationships that inform how people both develop but also utilize technology. And in that context, innovation is kind of the key to survival here. So with that in kind of a backdrop, I've invited on the show today, I think one of the world's premier experts on translating digital content, digital structure, digital infrastructure into pragmatic business results. And I'm going to give you a pretty extensive background here. I don't typically read a bio, but in this case, I want to actually spend a little bit of time pointing this out because this CV, this resume, I think, is worth articulating because it's going to inform our conversation. My guest today is a fellow by the name of Reggie James, and he's the founder of a company called Digital Clarity. Digital Clarity is based in London. And Reggie's got over 30 years of experience in digital marketing, and his particular expertise has grown and developed as digital marketing has advanced. He's witnessed, I think, some of the most phenomenal evolution, what's the word I want to use here, milestones that have occurred in the business landscape, and particularly during the early days of the internet. He really was one of the pioneers in this domain, and he has played a pretty pivotal role in shaping business models that are now commonplace in today's digital-driven world. So, he's founded and exited a couple of different companies, and I'm not sure exactly when Digital Clarity was founded. We'll talk about that in just a minute here. But with his 30 years of experience, he's approaching my experience band, which kind of dates both of us a little bit. But all of that being said, I want to just welcome Reggie James to the show. Reggie, it's good to have you here.
Blaine, thank you so much. It's an absolute honor to be here. I met you very briefly on office hours, where we had 10 minutes and we tried to squeeze in, try to get a word in. with the great David Meltzer, your good friend and colleague. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And there was a lot more to say, and we covered so many topics in such a short space of time. So it's great to be here, and thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Oh,
you can do my PR. So yes, that's wonderful. Thank you, Blaine.
my pleasure, my absolute pleasure. And I want to just echo what you just said there. Yeah, you were on the Office Hours show with David and myself. Yeah, the problem I have with Office Hours, I love the show. I mean, we're 600 and some odd episodes in now. It's got got a very strong audience base, but I've only got 10 minutes with guests.
Yeah.
And when we parse that out between the guests, David and myself, there's not a whole, I maybe get one question in. That
Sure.
is definitely not enough, particularly when I have somebody like you that has such a background. So I'm just really jazzed about having you on the show here today. And, the topical area just generically is the soul of business. And most people, when they think of soul, they think of something that's kind of ephemeral. It's kind of, it doesn't have hard edges around it. You contrast that with digital technology, which is really pragmatic. Yeah, we've got bytes, we've got uploads and downloads. I mean, it's stuff that's metrically friendly. You can measure it. Soul, I don't know how that gets measured, and I've been playing with this for about 40 years. So I'd be interested from your perspective when you hear the term soul of business, given the lens through which you will look, that 30 years of experience as a digital pioneer. When you hear the term the soul of business, what does that bring up for you?
Wow, it's well, the word itself. You can ask 10 different people, and you get sort of 15 different types of answers. It's just one of those things. But soul in the marketing stroke technology world, because I sit at the intersection of both, is something that's really, for me individually, it's something that's becoming more and more. We live in a world that's fairly toxic at times. Social platforms are rife. They are quite toxic. Certain platforms, which I won't mention, people would argue they have no soul. But soul to me is in absolutely everything that one does. It's something you sense. It's something that you feel when you have a conversation, and you feel that energy and that connection with another human. And for me, that is a touch point that creates an energy that has what I would call a level of soul within it. So it can be spiritual, can be used as one term, or non-physical is another term to use when describing soul for me. But I think there's so many different elements to it, David. It's such a great word. It looks at technology, as you say, bits and bytes. But with the development of AI, with the development of these large language models, there is rumor that these technologies are looking for a soulful, if you like. It's what separates sort of almost the man and beast in a way. Technology, which is very linear, and us as humans, which are far more rounded. We have the most powerful computer in the world between our ears. And I think that what's happening now is this rather sort of Philip K. Dick, who wrote Do Androids Dream of Electronic Sheep, or whatever, which became Blade Runner.
Yep.
And all of these things. This is a world. Science fiction is becoming science fact in many ways. All those things are happening. And the key point of that film is the soul within the android, the soul within the robot. And I think that we are heading towards that I robot, that I kind of element that we have to be careful about. It's causing governments a huge amount of headaches. What's real, what's not real. And then so from a technology side, from a marketing perspective, if I may, what we find is that people are yearning for real soul. They want to find we touched on it previously about the word authenticity. In a world that's full of AI and technology, people are looking for something that's real. And And though I work with tech leaders in the B2B space, business space, really, it's all about human to human. And for me, and I've sort of meandered a little bit, but that's to me is soul within the business, both in marketing and technology.
Reggie, that's probably one of the deepest explanations I've heard of that for in some time, and I want to thank you for that. That was very thoughtful. The idea you opened up on a whole bunch of different areas that I'm going to let's go this way, let's go that way. I read a book, and this goes back to the 1970s, I believe, when I was doing some consulting work. 1970s, early 80s, I was doing consulting work with Bell Laboratories when Bell Laboratories still existed. And there was a book out at that point in time called The Soul of the Machine. And you're nodding your head. It sounds as if you're somewhat familiar with it.
I've come across that from back in the day. Yes.
Yeah, and I don't remember much about the book, but I know it was intriguing to me because it spoke about this. What's the word I'd use here? The sensation of aliveness that came with being associated with an innovative platform, with things that had never been before but now are. And I'm butchering the concept here a little bit, but this is what I took away from it. And so when we fast forward, what now? That would be 40 some odd years, almost 50 years. And boy, that's
wow.
Wow. Oops.
The blink of an eye.
It is a blink of an eye. That aliveness, the promise of technology, as I've taken it for myself, is it allows me, if I'm using it well, I think of my phone, I think it allows me an element of connection that I wouldn't typically have access to. So in that sense, that connectivity is something that is a promise that I think brings me a sense of delight, brings me a sense of fulfillment, brings me a sense of aliveness. And it's got a double-edged sword to it in the sense of it can be numbing because it doesn't really connect me physically. You, as an example, I mean, you're in London. I'm up here on island, just a little bit off the coast of Seattle, and we're connected. And I really feel a connection here. It would be far deeper were I able to actually have a glass of wine in front of me with you sitting next to me, and we could have this.
I don't need asking twice. I'm booking the flights now. No, it's a very good point. I'm just going to pick up on it very quickly before, because it's a great thread. Soul in the Machine. It brings to me two very strong points. Number one, I remember watching Space Odyssey 2001.
Oh, Kubrick, yeah.
Yeah, Kubrick's powerful book. And then that was the computer HAL. HAL. Every single. Do you know how that name came about?
I read about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
For the audience.
So it is it's every letter again.
Mm-hmm.
So HAL. So it is product placement. HAL, IBM. But then again, there's a computer that becomes powerful, becomes human-like, has emotions, jealousy, all these different things. So it's always that, and I think man has always, when I say man, I use it in the sense of man, humans have always struggled with this powerful thing that they've created. The genie is out of the bottle now.
Yeah.
And you cannot put it in. We've come too far with it. The flip side of this, or a sort of parallel side that runs alongside this, is the fact that there's so many reports coming out now about teenagers who are so connected, but they've never felt so alone.
Yes.
And there's this bizarre sort of parallax, this kind of situation where you have these young people who've grown up with the internet. So you and I, Blaine, we if you were going to meet someone, you'd kind of arrange a time. You pick the phone up or whatever, or you see them at college and say, I'll meet you at such and such on Saturday at X. You'd go there. They'd either be late, you'd hang around for 20 minutes, half an hour, and you'd go back, or you'd go shopping. You wouldn't be sort of like texting every 2 seconds or whatever. But it's so we've lost something in a
Mm-hmm.
way. We've gained many things, as you say, we're connected and this and the other, but we've also lost something. And I think that what we're trying to do, what we're trying to find, which a lot of clever people are trying to do, and AI may go some way in sort of connecting those dots. But you're never going to get that human feel, that human touch. You know, when you see two people through a glass trying to touch each other,
Yeah.
it's never going to happen. It's a human condition that's so all of those positive things about technology, all of those amazing things that we can connect, but it's never going to be that human connection. Which, if you look at that Sistine Chapel and you see that the two hand, you know, the connection between those things, that is a human connection, albeit biblical and everything else up in the gods, so to speak, back then in the Renaissance period. But equally, you have this very deep search, you know, man's search for connection, which is always there. And
Mm-hmm.
it also brings up that whole thing. Sorry, I'll just say very quickly, is
Please.
that there is a taboo, which is very rarely talked about. With all us being connected, you can sit in a room, never leave the room. You know, you've got Amazon deliveries and various other things. Is loneliness. We in the UK we have a kind of loneliness index that we look at. This kind of bizarre thing the Brits do, but we look at, and certainly places like very advanced societies like Scandinavia, Sweden, places like that, they really, really focus on what can be, how people feel, because that's the way people feel is how they behave. So it's all of that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
so quite a lot of things there, but I think it is that we're connected, but we're alone. We've never been closer, but we're further apart, and that's something that only human interaction can bring.
You know, that brings up, you know, the experience of what we call reality is basically predicated on our five senses. Now, I have a world in my, you know, in my head, but in order for me to, you know, to experience it, you know, generally speaking, to experience it as real, it has to manifest itself in physical form in some way.
Mm.
Otherwise, nobody else has access to it, you know, in one sense here.
Yes.
So that sensory input, and I'm going to be moving this into, you know, kind of a digital conversation here, but yeah, we are connected, or we have the illusion, I think, of connection because we have proximity. But I can't reach out and shake your hand. I can't, yeah, you know, and in shaking your hand, I can't feel the warmth. It tells me there's a live human being here. That sort of thing. And I'm thinking here in terms of the loneliness. And I'm going to move this over to intersection of marketing and sales and product, you know, which is actually your area of expertise here.
Indeed.
If I'm marketing a product and I'm using digital mechanisms in which to do that, contrast that to me going into a hardware store and picking up, you know, the pipe or the wrench and feeling it in my hand, feeling the heft of it. There's a piece that digitization does not accommodate. Yet we're highly successful. And you're, you know, when the work that you do, I mean, I'm going to cite a statistic here. You've shown, remarkable growth for clients, and in certain cases can prove a 60+% increase in annual recurring revenues. You've got something that you have discovered here that speaks to this intersection of these three domains, marketing, sales, and product. I've got to assume, and this is where I'm asking for some correction, that you've in some way cracked the code a little bit here so that it becomes sensorially more real.
In a way, Blaine, yes. It's through, over 2 decades of huge amount of study, understanding large data sets. We looked at algorithmic data. You know, what makes people buy. what doesn't make people buy. But it's not just about selling stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's about all the things you just touched on about what makes things, what it's the way you make people feel. So selling generally is all about creating an opportunity or dealing with a challenge, and a kind of a number of layers sort of in between those two. But generally, when you're looking to sell a product, it's never, you always have to start with the customer in mind. And so our framework that we build is always about talking about where we always try and meet people where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So there's never one customer. People talk about this great thing in our world, in the tech world, called your ideal customer profile. And really, though it's true, like I can say I target CEOs. The reality is that when I'm engaging on a new business activity, it's normally somebody who's not a CEO. It could be a product manager, it could be someone completely different. It could be the 10th guy in the deal team making an inquiry. But you've got to treat that person with the same level of standing and everything else, which a lot of people tend to ignore. They go, "Oh, well, I need to speak to your boss, or I need to speak to," and I think that's the what we do is we have a framework where we have our first piece is, people call it discovery, but we call it diagnosis, almost like a medical professional. When you go into a if there's something wrong with you, the doctor's always going to say, tell me about your symptoms. Why do you feel the way you feel? Have you been overdoing things? Have you been doing? We do that in a much deeper. We've got a model that really drills deep, but it doesn't just deal with the business. It deals with all those different aspects, because invariably in any organization, it's the left hand's not talking to the right hand.
You've noticed that, huh?
Yeah. And all of the other things in between. And generally, you find that it starts at the top.
Yeah.
And it's one of our big challenges is sometimes helping management get out of its own way, because there is this. Why do people do what they do? We have certain questions. What is it that you do that makes your thing so good? But why did you start doing it in the first place? What are the things that why do your customers buy you? What are the things that you look for? But we go a lot deeper than that. We really go into the individuals, go into the how they work, how they because normally you get organizational structures where they try and fit what they're doing into what they feel they should be doing because they read it in a book.
Yeah.
They read it in a book, and there's no soul in that organizational structure where you're trying to sort of follow a process. You become a robot.
Mm-hmm.
Because saying, "Oh, if I do this, then I'm supposed to get that." But if you pivot a little bit, if you just look 5 or 6 degrees to the right and do it this way and think about why we're doing it. And so part of our job is to help people think and then give them the tools to come up with the answers. And then there you have these kind of aha moments, and doing it with different departments within the organization. And if you can then piece those bits together collectively and give them those frameworks to actually come up with those ideas themselves or collectively with us, then it's a lot better than being prescriptive and giving someone a tablet and say, here's a tablet, take this and you'll feel better. That's what everyone wants.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is if you actually do something, say it's going back to that ridiculous gym analogy again, rather than take some Ozempic, nothing against Ozempic, of course, but and you have this quick fix. The reality is that you're going to go back to where you were in 6 months' time, in a year's time. But if you make certain changes, change the way you think, but you have a motivation to do that, and you have a mindset, but to do that, then that is is something that becomes far more powerful because you live it, you breathe it, you see the value. You're tightening your belt, and you've got that extra notch, and you go, "Wow, I've lost a few pounds,"
Yeah.
or whatever it is. It says here.
It says
So,
here.
but yeah, no, it's those kind of things that are that we try and do with individuals, and it's you can't change an organization. You can't get somewhere by doing the same things. There has to be change,
Yeah.
but change just doesn't happen. You need help with that change, and you need someone who's going to guide you, and that's what we try and do.
See, that speaks to what I mentioned at the opening, that the change, people generally understand the value of the change when it's presented to them, but what they don't really appreciate is the disruption that is going to happen to the relationships in order to instill and install the change over a long period of time to where it now becomes a new identity and
Yes.
a new way of thinking, being, and doing. I mean, I know that you primarily work, and the company primarily works with tech leaders that are looking for growth. And you mentioned something about the prescriptive way. I mean, I picked it up in a book. I looked at this model. I went out and I've researched best practices. I mean, all of those sorts of things that are an existing template, and they try to fit it on top of their organization. And this is where I think, for me, the soul of business comes into play here, just in the same way that the soul of an individual comes into play. Yeah, I am so unbelievably unique. There will never, ever be another organism that is just like me. So, how that soul expresses itself is either going to be facilitated or inhibited by a facade, by belief systems, by all kinds of things. And what I'm looking for is authenticity. How do I express myself as fully and as authentically as I can? Not Blaine Bartlett, the idea, but the soul that is expressed through Blaine Bartlett, the idea. The same is true, I think, with a company. Yeah,
Yeah.
the idea of the company is what was the seminal act of creation. The founder had an idea, and that soul begins to express itself in a very unique way. I mean, there's a lot of consulting firms that work in your sector and your space, but your firm is uniquely expressing itself in a way that can't be replicated if you're being authentic. So I mean, I love the way that you explained that, Reggie, because it really, for me, speaks to the value of recognizing that I'm an authentic organization, or I'm a unique organization. How do I authentically express who we are through our technology? Because the technology is going to be the mechanism by which we navigate this world, now and in the future.
Absolutely. And I think change is, there's no two ways about it. Change is hard, and it's a for most people, when we speak to directors, we speak to the board of an organization. Some of the biggest challenges we have is the unwiring that we have to do of those individuals to try and get them to think differently,
Yeah.
because they come with so much baggage, and that baggage is we have an expression in our firm that we call it the circle of fear, and that is where organizations mimic. It's fear-based marketing, because they feel they have to copy their competition, because there is a perception that they're doing better than them, or they won that sale over them. So we better drop everything and do what they're doing. They're doing those kind of ads on LinkedIn. They're doing those kind of podcasts. They're doing those kind of different things. So what you get is an organization that's rushing around rather than having a belief in its own uniqueness, in its own soul, if you like. And the reason why it became in existence in the first place. Most of the companies we speak to are what one would term as a scale up. They've been around for a while, and they're
Mm-hmm.
looking to jump from X to Y. And what got them there may not necessarily get them to where they want to get to, and that's kind of where we come in. But what we do is look at the successes that got them to where they are today. So
Mm-hmm.
they always, everyone wants more,
Yeah.
but they have addressed every single hurdle they had in those last 5 or 10 years to get to where they are today. And they sometimes forget that because they want to be, it's that they feel they're coming from a place of lack in a way, and they're
Uh-huh.
trying to get something, and they believe that if by getting there they're going to get really happy, or their shareholders will be really happy, and they forget the journey that took them there. And so we have to somehow get them connected to the success that got to where they are today.
Mm-hmm.
And not to feel that their competition are 5 or 6 points ahead of them, or
Yeah.
they're still that and the other, because we know, Blaine, having been around the block a few times, and I'm no spring chicken, but really you realize how cyclical things are. That suddenly, remember MySpace, remember, you know, things that people said would never happen. Even Apple's had a wobble,
Yeah.
the share price, and these enormous companies. If you look at the Fortune 500, if you look at those top 100 companies from 20 years ago and look at them now, I think it's still Exxon, which is still the big, which is still in that top 10, top 20 to this day. Everything else is either tech or coming in, and suddenly things drifting out. Nothing is forever.
Right.
And it's one of those things where when you talk to leaders and they think that their life depends on everything, they're giving everything, it's they don't realize that they are dispensable, that they should really enjoy the journey that they're on and really live in that moment that they're in now, because the future, they can't experience that future. They don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
So doing the best they can right now to get to a perceived ideal, let's work on that. Really, let's make the best things that we can and be really great with customers and really connect with people, because that's what's going to sell what we do. And if that permeates throughout the organization, guess what? We've got the best and biggest sales force in the world, and people are going to buy that. And I think that's what organizations when they grow really struggle with. But I think that's the key thing. People tend to forget
Yeah.
how they got there.
You know,
So yeah,
yeah, I can do my best and not be my best, but if I am being my best, I will always do my best.
that's wonderful.
And there's a piece here around, yeah, that success. I got to a certain point. And yeah, one of the ways, and regular listeners to the show have heard me say this, but one of the ways that I define sustainable success in particular, how do I sustain success over the long haul? It's not about recapturing what was, it's about developing the capacity to continuously start over. What do I
Yes.
hold on to? What do I let go of? What do I take on new? And that position of being a new learner is, for adults, in my experience, incredibly uncomfortable. It's kind of like, what do you mean I don't know what I'm talking about? Well,
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
you don't know what you're talking about. So
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
learn something else.
No,
Wow.
absolutely. And you're right, Blaine. I mean, the only constant in life is change,
Yeah.
and it's how we adapt to change. It's how we, and it's normally through education. It's by educating ourselves. So this great podcast that you do, this great sort of community that you built, allows people to learn, develop, grow. I mean, I remember somebody saying, I don't know who it was, but it's something like every single answer you've ever wanted in life has been written in a book.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just like, or on YouTube probably, but it's kind of like,
It's available.
it's there. It's there if you really, if you are seeking something,
Yeah.
you can find it, and but it's a journey. It is not and we change. That kind of constant. When you look in the mirror, are you still that same person? Yes, you are. There's a great guy, you should check him out and maybe bring him on here because I think so many people will benefit from it. This guy called Rob Begg, who's worked with people like Bob Proctor that you
Yes.
yourself
Yep.
have worked with.
I know who Rob is.
And Rob Begg he's a great thinker. He's one of the great modern thinkers and really makes one stop in their track about, when we look in the mirror, we are still the same person. But if we looked in the mirror X years ago when we were a child, we are still that person. But, it's when you look behind the eyes and look at that soul, it's that is the very essence of who you are. And that's why it's so important when we're talking to people to try and bring them into that moment, because they're thinking of spreadsheets and what they're going to be having to eat later on, or they're sending emails because it's if I don't send that email out, so well, guess what? The world's still going to turn.
Yes,
and
it is.
And it's so true. Trying to bring people back, get them rooted back into where those things happen. And that's tough. It's tough to get people because all they want is, well, how many sales is this going to get us?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
it's
no, forget about the outcome. Let's look at what's informing the outcome.
Yeah. I mean, we do have we do have a sort of 90-day kind of program where we really get into it. So people are sort of keyed up. This isn't when I say longer term, there is an initial base. We do all the diagnosis. We look at we assess the opportunity that they have.
Mm-hmm.
We look at their go-to-market strategy. We look at all of these kind of things, and then literally put all the building blocks together in a kind of, creative spreadsheet, for want of a better term. Huge amount of analysis, but give them something practical. So each step of the way, they know those building blocks they need, rather than just trying to run and not build those foundations. So that's what we try and do.
Beautiful.
All of the things you're talking about, they really resonate with me a lot. So,
folks have been talking to Reggie James, founder of a company called Digital Clarity, based out of the UK. You need to check him out. Absolutely. Particularly if you're a tech leader looking for growth, you will not find a better resource. I will guarantee it. Absolutely. Reggie, where can people find out more about you and or Digital Clarity?
You can go to digital-clarity.com, or you can just type my name into LinkedIn. So please connect with me on LinkedIn, and that's probably the best place to find me.
Great.
So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Blaine.
The pleasure has definitely been mine. I've loved this conversation. It's been wide-ranging, just like I hoped it would be. Folks, you've been listening again to Reggie James. This is Blaine Bartlett. You've been listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. My admonition at the end of every show is not going to change. It's going to be the same here. Find a way in your life to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. And you're going to find your life and your world works a whole lot better. There's nothing in nature that serves as a center of accumulation. Just get rid of that notion that you need to collect things and hoard it. Give it away. That's probably the easiest way to connect with your authentic self, is to give what you have away. And until next time, take care and have a great week.